Welcome to my mBraining Live series and my interview with Suzanne Henwood, mBIT Master Coach and Trainer. How do we keep up with the rapidly changing world of neuroscience? Today I have with me Suzanne Henwood, who is a Master Coach and Master Trainer in mBraining, as well as NLP, and you have a PhD in?
Continuing professional development. So it sits under philosophy, but it's continuing professional development.
Okay. And I mean, you're doing some research, but you're also doing a whole lot of coaching. You're also doing a lot of training. I know you have, for example, Master Coach coming up in Dubai in October, but I'm sure that you've got just normal trainings happening before that and after that as well.
And normal trainings in Dubai as well, let me tell you.
Oh, okay, right. And then, on top of all of that, you and I today actually are talking about, the neuroscience behind it and how rapidly research is now happening in all of the body, not just in the head brain, not just. And so we talk in mBraining about the three brains being head, heart, and gut. And then there are neuroscientists who talk about the three brains within the head brain. And then, of course, you can break it down even further within the head brain into specific lobes and functions. But the neuroscience isn't just what's happening in our heads. There's also the whole neuroscience and studies of what's happening around the heart, what's happening in the gut, what's happening in the pelvic brain, what's happening in the nervous system and the vagus nerve, for example, and all that intercommunication, which we used to think was just chemical or neurochemical. And now we're discovering it's more than that.
Even more.
Exactly. I mean, and I don't even know where to start asking you questions because, I mean, I am well read, relatively speaking, except that, I am a babe at your knees when it comes to this stuff.
I still feel like an absolute newbie in many realms. So I think it is one of those things that it is changing so much and so fast.
Yes.
That actually for anybody to keep up to date, it's almost like you have to keep up to date in a niche and hope you can get. And not try to keep up with everything.
Oh, but come on, but you don't know me very well. I want to know it all.
Good luck with that. Good luck with that.
Yeah, no. So I mean, so I'm also fascinated. So you've got somebody like Porges that did, polyvagal therapy. But then you've got somebody like Deb Donna that goes, well, what do we do with this and how do we use it in therapy? What's the practical application of it? Yep. And I'm seeing that in all kinds of different realms.
Yeah.
Where you've got the hardcore neuroscientists of how are the neurons firing, where are they firing, what's happening, and then you've got either the behavioral scientists, the psychologists, the neuroscientists that are way more interested in the practical application of it, going, well, let's break this down. What does this mean?
Absolutely. And there's no one agreement, right? There's no one, you can't go to one source and get the right answer. So part of it is about having a wide enough foundational knowledge to be able to take what's happening and then use it in your own context. So if we go back to Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory, was 25 years ago.
Yes.
It was absolutely phenomenal in what it came up with, although even for him, he has somebody very vocally and very publicly saying he's got it wrong.
Absolutely. And I've read the ones and gone, oh my goodness, it's wrong. And I was like, well, wait a minute, but is it? Because the thing is that when I look at Deb Donna's work of polyvagal theory in therapy and the application of it, works.
Absolutely. Now, of course, there's correlation and causation, right? So just because something works, it's still right and the cause.
Yes.
But even, and I say that with a huge humility, and I've trained with Deb Donna in polyvagal informed therapy and love her work. Even her work if you start to weave in some of the other kind of related fields of study, for example, in Master Coach, we talk about autonomic spacing. If we take that into Deb Starner's autonomic ladder, the ladder changes.
Right.
So I'm using Deb Starner's work, absolutely, love it to bits, and I have already adapted it to bring in other fields of knowledge that I know that are research-based and evidence-based that says, well, actually, maybe there's another nuance here. I think there's a couple
and I think it's nuances as opposed to it's not an opposition. It's just like, I mean, and we talk in mBraining how, from that polyvagal of sympathetic fight and flight or parasympathetic rest and digest or, avoidance and shutdown. Okay. There is also for your head brain can be in that scattered fight and flight or in that almost turned off state, the same way that your heart can be in either and your gut can be in either.
Or a combination of.
And your head might be in fight and flight and your gut might be switched off.
Absolutely. At the same time.
Exactly. And so, and neuroscience, tells us, how are thoughts made? And we haven't even been able to answer that question. Where do thoughts come from?
Yeah. Where do they suddenly appear? Because you almost can't go quiet, right? It's an absolute fallacy that meditation is about turning thinking off. Thinking will still come.
Yes.
So out of the nothingness comes, and then you could go really spiritual and philosophical about out of the nothingness comes creation. So where do you want to take this conversation, Beth?
Well, let's talk about what you've been doing in research recently, and where you're focusing your attention at this moment. And then we'll go a bit wider.
Okay. So even my own work is in several streams at the moment.
And you told me to niche down.
Did I actually say that? Do you have that recorded? Yeah. I mean, I am kind of niching, but not completely on one line.
Yeah.
So a lot of the work that I've been doing in the last, 2 years, really, one of the things Grant asked me to do when he died was write mBIT advancing.
Yes, absolutely.
And I've been doing that for 2.5 years, and it's getting closer, but it's been an enormous piece of work. One, because there was nothing to pick up from him to write from. There was about 5
No, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So I started from scratch. So that's been a huge ongoing piece of work. Out of that has come a hugely increased width and depth of all things ANS, pelvic brain. And so ethically, knowing that I can't go and teach out-of-date material.
Not yet.
Well, I would never go and teach out-of-date material, not knowingly.
Okay.
Right? I just don't think that's ethical. My whole background's in professional development and education, and how important it is to stay up to date. At the beginning of Master Coach, we teach what mastery is and the fact that it is about being cutting edge, keeping up to date.
Well, and that's just it. I mean, it just, the more I learn, the more aware I've become of how much I don't know. And I know that I am well informed. I know that I'm keeping up. And yet I'm seeing how badly I'm not keeping up.
Yeah, you and me both.
Yeah.
So I started to modify, adapt, change, extend my courses in order that I would be teaching as up to date at any moment. So even I just taught Master Coach in Australia, and I'm getting ready to go to Dubai, and there's already more to add in.
Yes.
So, it's fast changing. The latest figure I read was knowledge in the world is doubling every 12 hours.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Okay, so there is, I mean,
hours.
So even if knowledge in neuroscience is doubling every 12 hours, that is impossible to keep up with.
Hence back to my comment of what's your niche that you want to keep fully up to date with.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So one of my streams of work has been writing mBIT advancing, and through that updating the materials for both coach cert and master coach.
Right, absolutely.
And that's been a huge investment of my time, my intellect, my searching on research.
Yeah.
In parallel with that, I've also been doing for the past 7 years now, and again, it's this close, developing, researching, validating, ensuring it's reliable, the multiple brain preference questionnaire.
Right, exactly, which you developed with Grant. Exactly.
I did about 4 years of research on that.
Yeah.
When he died, he gifted that to me, and again, I felt that it was appropriate to bring it up to date. It was only ever written for the 3 brains, so we've adapted it for the 5 brains. Right. And we've gone down.
Just out of curiosity, because I'm going to throw this at you, just out there. If there was a 6th brain, what is it?
Well, one thing I would say is you certainly can't just go, what do we want the 6th brain to be?
Exactly, because if you ask me what I want it to be, I want it to be the pineal gland or the fascia, but I know that that is not scientifically backed up.
Absolutely. I'll have my left little toe because that's easy to find.
Exactly, but it doesn't work that way. But scientifically and backed by science, where would you go?
If I had to at this point in time, I would be curious about fascia. But, and there is quite a big but with that, I think fascia is so closely aligned to ANS.
Therein lies my challenge. And that's why I say I go with fascia, but I go with fascia with a lot of reservations and go, but I'm not convinced even myself.
No. And if you're going to go beyond that, then the skin is the biggest organ in the body and also has some intelligence. Now, whether it meets all the criteria,
yeah, I'm not convinced it does, once again, but, for being a brain, but, it's once again coming back. And, I mentioned pineal gland, but is that really any separate from the head brain?
Oh, the pineal gland, like any part, you talked about earlier, the head brain itself being in multiple areas. And what we know about the head brain is changing almost on an annual basis. So the triune brain, it's largely been debunked. The left and right brain, it's largely been debunked.
Exactly.
So what we're looking at now in the modern neuroscience literature is the brain network theory.
But now it becomes way more complex because that's like the internet then of the brain.
Absolutely, but isn't that reality? So we've tried to kind of silo it down to make it really simple. In doing that, you've lost the synergistic value of that complexity.
Well, because the thing is that what we try to do is look at it biologically, the way we look at the biology of organs of the body, of lobes and physical location of how this is.
Yep.
And obviously function and yes, you can kind of separate out different parts of the brain according to functions. We know that, but at the same time, they all work together.
And they all need to work together. So to separate any one out minimizes what you're studying. The very fact that when we talk about neuroscience, we're x-raying or doing PET scans or CTs or MRIs of the head is already
automatic
system up.
Exactly. It's already limiting what we know because we are completely discounting every other neuron in the body that is firing at the same time.
Yeah, and there will be some neuroscientists who will absolutely argue that point.
Yeah.
I went and trained with a head-based neuroscience not that long ago in order that I could understand the language and what was being spoken so that I could have sensible, intelligent conversations. Mm-hmm. And I was quite honest and said, look, this is where I come from. And he said, mBraining is pseudoscience at best. It's rubbish, basically. Yeah. And if you want to come on the course, you're welcome, but know that I will openly mock that. And I went, hey, I'm big enough. I can do that.
Yeah, exactly.
So his first question, usually when he's coaching clients, this is someone who swears there's nothing below the neck, this is going to surprise you. Put your hand on your heart.
Wait.
Put your hand on your heart. What's your core value?
Why would I need to put my hand?
Dropped on the floor.
Why would I put my hand on my heart if everything is from here up?
You would have to ask him that. And he is adamant that he's right. And he is very vocal about who's wrong and what's wrong. I sat there absolutely shocked and stunned to see and hear what I was seeing from what I know of mBraining. So I think the difficulty is, who do you follow? Who do you trust? Who do you evidence? And this comes right back to, why must we stay up to date and be critical about the evidence we use? What is the evidence we're using, and is it reliable? Is it a big enough population study?
Yeah.
Or is it just two people, effectively a case study?
Well, because the thing is that, one of the things, I'm hearing this a lot of, there's the evidential, the research that's numbers based. And then there's the experiential, where I've seen as a doctor, for example, so many cases of this type that I'm starting to question the research done in the lab. And is that research even related to the reality of what I'm seeing in my practice? Yeah. And then when that doctor or that psychologist in practice talks to the researchers and the scientists and says, this doesn't match up, the researcher, oh yeah, but you don't have any data and you didn't do it. You didn't conduct a study
properly.
You didn't do it properly. It's just what you saw and experienced. And yet I sit there going, and when do we say, after I've seen 3,000 patients and my experience of these 3,000 works this way and doesn't match your data of what you've done in the lab?
Yeah, I'm with you all the way. I can do research on both sides of the tree. I've done absolutely positivistic quantitative research, and I've done probably the most qualitative that you can out in grounded theory. And I'm pretty comfortable. I always get a statistician to help me with the stats part of positivistic.
Absolutely.
I'm pretty comfortable in both sides.
Yeah.
That isn't the norm for all people, and for a lot of people, they will sit themselves on one side and say only this counts.
And yet and that's just, you and I have had this discussion and other things about the nuances of being able to say it might be this and that.
Absolutely. Or it could be this until we discover X, Y, and Z, because we can only bring into research at the moment what we can measure. Now, there's a massive new piece of imaging just about to hit the ground, which is claiming that it can do way more detail of the functional and the blood studies in both heart and gut. So that's going to be really interesting, because up until now, we haven't had the exquisite level of detail in the body that we've had in the head.
Right.
And we're still learning about the head, even though we've had that since, gosh, CT came out in the 70s.
Exactly. We've had 50 years of that.
Yeah. And we're still learning new things. And
we're still applying it, going, well, wait a minute, what we saw and how we interpret it and the meaning we made of that isn't actually what we were seeing, because we looked at it from this perspective based on an erroneous belief.
Yeah. And the body is changing.
So of course it is.
Just recently, they have discovered that human beings, as we evolve, are getting an extra artery in the arm.
What do we need that for?
Oh, who knows yet, right? But the fact is, we've proven it's happening. So if it's happening there could be other instrumental changes in the head brain that are evolving
that we're not even aware of at this moment in time.
Aware of. In fact, they're saying that teenagers, for example, their social area of the brain is shrinking.
Oh dear. Okay. Yes. Okay. Because of course the social interaction that they're having is shrinking as they're becoming more computer based and data driven and all of that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So talking of which.
Yeah. And so
what we used to be able to see, if we went back and rescanned those people, not only would we have greater ability to scan more exquisitely, but actually the heads that we're scanning may have changed.
Right. And also, I mean, like if we look at it, I mean, just from that whole, epigenetics of environment and how the environment affects us, what our food is, what we're inhaling is air, what is pure air now versus what was pure air 50 years ago. What is water now versus what was water then,
all the food chemicals that we've added into the system, into how we grow food.
And how we preserve food so it looks fresh 2 weeks later, all those little things that we discount and think they have no impact, but are we absolutely sure?
We can almost guarantee they are having an impact left, right, and center. The fertility dates are coming way down. Fertility in blokes is going down. There's a shocking reduction in fertility rates in blokes. Just give you one example of a paper I've read this week, and I've shared it on mBraining Global, where I do tend to share the papers that really fire me up. So they've done a study on the microbiome that is showing up in saliva, and have shown that for people who have had suicidal thoughts, the microbiome changes.
Now, if you go to somebody like the biology of belief, he's going to say that's absolutely true.
But now we've shown it. So now we have the evidence.
Exactly.
So this is,
and that is fascinating.
Come together, because what we know works because we've seen it work. We're starting to get the measurable, objective science that shows it works and begins to explain why.
Yeah. And I mean, for example, mindfulness. People have practiced meditation and mindfulness for thousands of years, but for the last 30 or 40 years, scientists have been studying it and the effect of it on the brain and the body.
Absolutely.
And saying, this is some of what actually happens, to your heart rate, to your circulation, to oxygenation, in the cells when you're practicing mindfulness.
So for a lot of people, and if I'm honest, probably me included 10 years ago, having that evidence kind of draws me in to give it a go.
And for me too, I love I say the woo-woo, but I love knowing why it works.
And how. Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
So I went off task. Stream number 1 of my work is writing mBIT advancing. Stream number 2 is multiple brain preference questionnaire. Stream 3 is, I guess, updating all the courses. And then stream 4 is writing books. So we've just had the Ultimate Gratitude Journal published.
Right.
We've got the next book written, and it will be out in the next year.
And you've got the children's book that was published.
Yeah, that was published a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of others, I guess. I just kind of grabbed off the shelf what people might be interested in.
Okay.
The one that was written with Grant that came out of Worldwide Coaching Magazine.
Okay, Worldwide Coaching Magazine. Yeah, exactly.
This is probably the most academic book that we had a chapter written in together.
Okay, Intuition Research as Practice. Wow. Okay.
So that's a really high-end academic book. It wouldn't be everyone's kind of cup of tea to go and buy that, but we had a chapter written in there talking about the multiple brain questionnaire. So it was about, I guess, us establishing that the research had been done, that we were the authors of it. Nobody else owns it. And in fact, now I own it. So, we wanted to make sure that our names and mBraining went on that.
Yes.
Before it went out. Now, unfortunately, a couple of people took it and put it out, and it kind of.
It is what it is. Yeah, exactly.
It is what it is. So as quickly as we could get that research published with mBraining and our names on it to say, no, this was our work, and it was a lot of work to get it out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I guess they're my 4 main streams, on top of my everyday practice of coaching clients and, talking on summits and just generally being passionate about mBraining and the sort of coaching work I do.
Exactly. So typically, let's go to mBraining and coaching, just a 5-minute snippet maximum, because that's unfortunately all we've really got left in time.
I told you it wouldn't be long enough.
Oh, I know, right? And I know, I feel like we just dipped our toes in and haven't really even talked about any one subject in particular. But going to the practical application, and I love about mBraining that we take the neuroscience, we take the ancient wisdom, and we bring it into the practical everyday application of life, whether it's problem solving, whether it's decision making. For me, state management, that being able to regulate, not suppress my feelings, but to acknowledge the feelings, the emotions, the tension, the stress, and then choose regulation. So let's talk coaching with it for 2-3 minutes.
Coaching with that. Well, for me, I love mBraining. I absolutely love it. And the more I got into it, the more complicated my clients were kind of becoming and presenting. I'm very lucky I work with 2 GPs, so they send me patients who have already got medical signs and symptoms. And as that started to push my boundaries, I felt like I needed to go and support what I was doing. So I went and trained in a number
different
of
therapy. Yeah, exactly.
So what I now do is use an integrated approach with clients, and mBraining is absolutely core to that. I'm talking about intelligences, but I will dip into other modalities to do the intervention work or to get the deeper conversation. Yeah. And then of course mBraining Master Coach comes along and ramps it up another level. So my whole scope and niche changed as a result of that combination of wider training and mBrit Master Coach. And I largely now use it in everything you're saying, that state regulation. So I use it for stress and anxiety. I use it for healing trauma that leaves those embodied hurt.
And I know for me, the more I've learned about all of that, the more I've noticed all these patterns that I thought was personality and how I am, and went, oh my God, that's my high functioning trauma response.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's my hyper independence showing up in this way. And it's just a pattern.
It is just a pattern, and it's a pattern that was created through adaptation to protect you at the time.
Absolutely. And now is not helping.
now may not be helping. It might still be getting you an outcome, and that's part of the issue.
Absolutely, yes.
Is having to replace that. What I absolutely detest is hearing people fire that back at people in a way that's gaslighting. Right. Because of your trauma, you're hallucinating. Because of your trauma, you're oversensitive. Because of your X, Y, and Z. And I hear it time and time again in the kind of self-help circles, groups. I've even heard it in mBraining. I've had it aimed at me in mBraining. And I'm like going, oh, bless you.
Yeah, but because we don't know what we don't know until, and I mean, like, I'm in a lot of kind of, at the moment, a lot of trauma informed coaching areas. And it's all for my personal growth, not because I plan. And, one of my friends is like, so you're going to start studying therapy? I was like, oh, that's the last thing I want to do, She's like, yeah, but you keep going there.
Like, yeah. It's an interesting question, isn't it? It's where is that line between coaching and therapy? I think it's definitely moved as a general concept in the last 10 years. But for me, my line has definitely moved into that gray area.
Right, but you've done the trainings for it, and so
I felt I had to stay safe.
Exactly. And so for me, I'm on that line of, do I go do the trainings now because I'm so far into that line, and I want to stay as a coach, not,
I'm still a coach. So I still call myself a coach. If somebody rings me, so I'll give you an example. I had a lovely 21-year-old client ring me recently. I have OCD, I've got PTSD, I have panic attacks, I've had bulimia. I mean, there was another one. It was just phenomenal, right? So I went, oh, hang on, stop. Let me tell you who I'm not. I'm not a therapist.
Yes, exactly.
I'm not a therapist. I'm not even a counselor, although some of my qualifications in counseling. I am not a psychologist, and I am not willing to treat those clinical conditions.
Exactly.
She said, bless her, I hate the labels. The labels are just labels for convenience. And I actually don't think they're labels. I think it's a trauma. And her trauma was a drug rape incident when she was 17. So she could even place it when everything had changed.
Yeah.
So I said, I would be happy to see her for anxiety and stress.
Yes.
What's happening is all the other stuff is crumbling. But I wouldn't have ever taken it on as a therapeutic client.
No, exactly.
I'd go over the top to say, I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not this.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I know for me, I want all of that to be informed as to what I'm not.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's get it out on the table and be absolutely honest. And where the line is that I will work to
and because I mean, I don't want to be a therapist. If I wanted to be a therapist, I'd have studied therapy. I don't want to be a therapist. I want to be a coach. Yeah.
But it then kind of begs the question, you know, what is a therapist and whose definition?
Exactly.
If you look back a few years, Worldwide Coaching magazine did a whole issue on therapy versus coaching. Yeah. And the papers were fascinating. I wrote one of them. I just went from a few definitions of what's the definition of coaching, what's the definition of therapy, and hang on a minute, isn't there already crossover here?
Exactly. Well, I mean, I was looking at a definition by psychologists of what personality was. And, you know, they were like, personality is a pattern of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that create your unique style of being. And I was like, but as a coach, I can change all of those patterns. Of course, I sat there and went, oh, oops.
So then that's back to my point about, are we really still coaches in the old-fashioned sense of the word, which was really around goals or executive leadership, you know, like
exactly, or that decision making, or you know, a life plan kind of thing.
But decision making, don't get me going, right? Because how can you, knowing what we know, coach decision making without coaching the multiple brains?
Well, and that's just it. How can I coach decision making without looking at your relationships and what's important to you, what your priorities are? How do I coach decision making without looking at your emotions and how you feel about this, or your boundaries and what keeps you safe, what your risk tolerance is?
If you want to know more about Suzanne, you can find her on mBraining Global, or you can look her up on mBrainingforsuccess.com. The link is in the comments. Thank you for joining us.